obnoxious. Speak up, obnoxious. All right. And now the first word of this year is obnoxious. Okay, here we go.
It's okay, we've had worse first 2 words here.
Rahmana Litzlan. Okay, good morning, everybody. We are on Yom Daf Pehei Amud Aleph. And we are going to start by the 2 dots, about 10 or 12 lines down. Mi shenafal alav mapoles. So if we go back to the Mishnah on Pei Gimel Amud Aleph, toward the bottom of Amud Aleph, the part of the Mishnah that we're going to be discussing says the following: Mi shenafal alav mapoles, somebody upon whom a wall falls, and we will get to some rather famous Gemaras today, famous lines, famous Mishnayos, and very, very sadly, quite a relevant sugya. We wish the community of Surfside much refuah. So Misha Nafla of Mapoles, Safek Usham, Safek Enosham. So something number one is there anybody under that wall or not? Safek Chai, Safek Mace. And even if there is a person under that wall, is that person alive or dead? Safek Kuse, Safek Yisrael. And then the third Safek is whether that person is a non-Jew or a Jew. And the Mishnah Paskin, Mefakhin Alav Es Hagal. We remove the stones from on top of it. So back on Pehei Amud Aleph, the Gemara wants to know Maika Amar, and immediately Rashi explains what is the Gemara's question. Rashi says Maika Amar, about an inch down. Maika Amar Kohani Sfeke. What do I need these 3 sfekos for? Diktani Maya Asu Lashmina. These 3 sfekos written in the Mishnah, what are they coming to teach me? Gemara says Lo Mebaya Ka'amar. The way to read this Mishnah is in the form of Lo Mebaya. Lo Mebaya means you don't really need. So you don't really need to teach you this, but I do need to teach you that. And the formulation is as follows. Lo Mebaya Safek Usham Safek Enosham. I don't really need to teach the case of whether there is a suffix, is there somebody there or is there not somebody there. That if somebody is there who's alive, we remove the stone. But even if there is simply a suffix of whether that person is alive or dead, we still remove the stone from on top of him. And furthermore, we don't even need that case. We don't even need to teach the case of a suffix, whether the person who is alive or dead is a Jew. But that third suffix in the Mishnah, that is whether the person who is either alive or dead is either a Jew or not a Jew, the Mishnah Paskin, we still do what we can to attempt to save that person's life. Moving on in the Gemara, we are by the second set of 2 dots on Pehei Amud Aleph, Mitzauhu Chai Mefakhin. So the Mishnah said, again, back on Pei Gimel Amud Aleph, the very last line of the Mishnah, that if we find him alive, we remove the rubble that's on top of him. And if he is deceased, then we leave the rubble in place. Asks the Gemara, Mitzauhu Chai Pshita. Well, if you find the guy alive, obviously, get him out. Obviously, you have to remove the stones. Says the Gemara, Lo tzricha de'afilu lechaye sha'ah. The Gemara says, no, we're teaching a case here where even if the person will only live for a short while, we still bring him out. The Shulchan Aruch Paskins in Shin Chaf Tes, or Chaim Shin Chaf Tes, Seif Dalid, as follows: that even if you find somebody and he'll only, in accordance with this Gemara, and he'll only be able to live for a very short while, the Shulchan Aruch says, do what you can to pull him out. You'll extend his life at least by a little bit. Now, the very next case of the Mishnah is seemingly also very obvious. V'imeis yanichu. Well, and if he's already sadly deceased under that pile of rubble, well, then leave him where he is. Hanami pshita. That's also fairly obvious. What do I need a Mishnah to teach me that for? Lo tzricha, and the Bach adds in the word Ella. Lo tzricha Ella the Rabbi Yehuda ben Lakish. We need that line in the Mishnah to teach us and put context around a line, a teaching of Rabbi Yehuda ben Lakish, Titania. Ein matzilin es hameis mipnei adleka. According to the Tana Kama in that brisa, we do not save a person who is already deceased from a fire. And we're talking about, of course, on Shabbos. Amar Rabbi Yehuda ben Lakish, Shamati shematzilin es hameis mipnei adleika. So Rabbi Yehuda ben Lakish says, I heard that we do save a dead person's body from a fire. So what are we talking about here? Rashi says, Shematzilin es hameis lachatzer hamiureves. You move a dead body within a chutzner that has an eruv, deleka isra el tiltul. Because as we know in the Rambam Paskins, that the entire limud of Muktzah and Hilchos Shabbos, all of it is entirely derabanan. What is not derabanan is hotzah on Shabbos, carrying without an eruv. That's a deraisa. So that we don't allow you to do. Aval hacha. So we'll get to this in a second. And even Rabbi Yehuda ben Lakish is teaching, this is not a blanket heter. He is only talking about deleka. He's only talking about a case of fire that threatens a deceased person's body. So why do we allow this? Because a person, bahu, like the word behala, a person is so distraught, so beside himself over his deceased relative, that if you don't permit this person to move the mace, he may come to put out the fire. Now, once again, moving a mace, we have a famous Gemara, Shabbos Daf Lamed Amud Beis by David HaMelech, and Shlomo sent a shaila to the base medrash. What am I supposed to do? And they said, put either a kikar lechem or a tinok on David HaMelech's body and move it. And that is the first recorded muktzah shaila in history. And the reason that is allowed is because a body is muktzah machmas gufo, and moving it, especially for kavod abrios, is only a derabanan, so we matter you to move it. So aval hacha, but here in this case, by a fallen wall, ilo sharisle ma'isle lemevet. So if you don't move the body from a pile of rubble, nothing further that is detrimental to the integrity of the mace is going to happen. So we don't allow you, in accordance with the psak of our Mishnah, to move the body. So now the next case. Now the Gemara wants to know in this next question, to what lengths and how do you go about checking to see whether a person is still alive? Tana Rabbanan, ad heichan hu bodek. Until where do you check? Rashi fills in the blank here. Ad heichan hu bodek, about an inch up. Im dome lameis she'enu mazi zevara. That if a person is as if one is dead and his limbs are no longer moving, ad heichan hu mefakech ladas haemes. How and where do you check this person to determine the truth? Is this person alive or dead? First opinion in the Brisa, ad chotmo. You have to find a way to get to that person's nose. Says Rashi, v'menchius bechotmo she'ena motzi ruach. That if you get to his nose and you don't feel any breath coming out, vadai meis v'yanichu. Then he's for sure mace, and then you leave that person where he is. V'yesh omrim ad libo. And the second opinion in that brisa is that you have to get to his heart, see if you can detect the heartbeat. Badak umatza el yoni mesim, very sadly so relevant that if you check at the top of a pile and you only find people who are deceased, lo yomar kvar mesu atachtonim. Don't automatically assume that those lower in the rubble automatically have perished, and you should really still go after them. Because there's a recorded case in the Gemara where those at the top of the pile were deceased, and those at the bottom were still found alive. So nema hani tanoi ki hani tanoi. So the Gemara suggests that this machlokes between checking a person's nose and the mouth of a person's heart is similar to the following machlokas of Brisa and Tanya. What is the starting point for the creation of human life in terms of the actual development of the fetus? So the first opinion is Merosho, from his head. And the Nazer, as Rashi points out, the Nazer who sararosh. This refers to the hair on the head. So the first opinion in this brisa teaches that the human life The fetus is created beginning with the head. And that would accord with the opinion that you need to check for a human life by checking the nose, because that's the start of life, that's the head. Abba Shaul Omer, Metiburo. Abba Shaul in this brisa, his opinion is that we check from the navel, either the lower torso, the upper midsection, somewhere in that neighborhood is where life begins, and it's a hub and spoke model. And the roots continue from that point. So according to the first opinion, the fetus, the human being, starts at the head and continues north to south. And the opinion of Abba Shaul is it starts in the middle and spreads out limbs, head, legs, etc. So maybe we would suggest that the first opinion that says ad chotmo, that you have to check for his nose, is against the opinion of Abba Shaul that says that everything really starts in the torso area, which might lead you to think that maybe you should check the heart first. Answers the Gemara, no, afilu tema Abba Shaul. You could even say that our brisa above even accords with the opinion of Abba Shaul. Ad kan lo kamer Abba Shaul hasam ela linyan yitzira. Because over there, Abba Shaul was only talking about the creation of life. The chomidim mimitzi asa mitzar. Because everything from the center is created. Mitzar, like a yotzer ha'adam, yotzer borei choshech, biada yotzer, that same word. Abala inyan pikuach nefesh. But when it comes to saving a life, even Abba Shaul would agree that the ikr of life is detected from a person's from a person's nose. That everything that has a ruach chaim, everything that is alive, that ruach chaim is in a person's nose. Amar Rav Papa puts a different context around this machlokes. Machlokes mimatzah l'mal. What happens if you discover somebody feet first? Then what do? So according to Rav Papa, this whole machlokes, the nose of the heart, is talking about that case where if you find a person's feet, you've got to find a way to get to their nose to figure out if they're still breathing. Avam limala lamata. But if you find a person head first, kevin the badak le'ad chotmo, once you're able to check that person's nose, shuv eino tzarich. You no longer need to check any further. Why? Because we know that if you're able to detect life, you're going to detect it with a person's ability to breathe through their nose. We are now going to get into a sugya that's going to take us all the way into the middle of Pehei Amid Beis, all the way to the Mishnah. 7 different viewpoints, 7 different opinions on how we know that pikuach nefesh is doche Shabbos. And we will encounter some very famous lines in here. And the first, most of the opinions, all of them actually, except for the last one, are going to have a common difficulty. And we will end up holding like the opinion of Shmuel in a line that everybody here will be familiar with. Here we go. We are at the bottom of Pehei Amid Aleph in the final narrow line. Ukfar haya Rabbi Shmuel v'Rabbi Akiva, Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah v'halchim b'derech. So Rabbi Shmuel, Rabbi Akiva, Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, they're on the road. The Levi Hasada of Rabbi Shmuel ben Oshel, Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah v'halchin achareim. And their lessers, perhaps their Talmidim, good morning. Levi Hasada, who Rashi says he has no idea who it is. The Gaonim pipe in that perhaps it was somebody who was involved in being the Sader, all of the Mishnayos. Perhaps it was somebody who was involved in making the big day hasarad that were used to be mishares in the Beis Hamikdash. But either way, Levi, Asad, and Rabbi Shmuel were walking behind them. Nisha la she'ela zu bifneim. And the following question came before them. Minayin lepikuach nefesh shedocha es Shabbos. How do we know that saving a life can push off the mitzvos that one is obligated to observe on Shabbos? Na'aneh Rabbi Shmuel ve'amar. So the first of these great Tanoim listed in this story answers and says, Im b'machteres yimtza haganav. So if we catch a robber in the act of breaking in, the owner is allowed to protect himself from that break-in. Umazeh shesafek al mamon, and we know that in this case, we're not 100% certain. Is this person just coming in to rob your jewelry box? Or is he coming to kill you? and we've also know ushvichas damim metame es haaretz, and murder defiles the land. V'gorm l'shchina shetzisalik mi Yisrael, and causes the Shechina, causes the Kadosh Baruch Hu to leave from the midst of Klal Yisrael. Nitan lahatzilo b'nafsho. We know that despite how horrible murder is and how doubtful it may be whether this person's even coming to kill you or not in the first place, you're allowed to kill him. How much more so that saving a life will push off the prohibitions of Shabbos. That's number one. Number two, Na'ana Rabbi Akiva v'Amar. Rabbi Akiva answers the questioners, and he says the following. He brings the following case: V'chi yazid ish al re'ev. And if somebody is moving with intent, yazid, like the word mazid, he's moving with intent to hurt his friend. The missing words there of that begomer are lehargo be'arba. So somebody's moving to kill somebody else. Me'im mizbechi, from with the mizbeach tikachenu lamus. So what's going on? Rashi 5 lines up. In kohenhu shabola avoda avoda. We're talking about a kohen who is about to start the avoda, and he has been accused of moving to kill somebody. We pull him from the avoda. Before he can start, we take him to the basin right away and we kill him. However, the Gemara teaches me'im mizbechi. That's only if he is with the mizbeach, about to perform the avoda. Below me'al mizbechi, but not if he's already in the midst of the avoda. Again, Rashi 3 lines up. Im hischel ba'avoda ein mafsik lavo lidon. That if he's already started the avoda, any part of the avoda in the Beis Hamikdash, we don't stop him in the middle of the avoda. Ela mashlim avoda. So we allow him to finish his avoda, and then we take him to the basin.
That Kohen that killed the Geshem in this Yuma.
Broke the guy's leg.
Right, so they did the same thing here to him, no?
No, but that was an act that happened because of the avoda.
Right, so it wasn't.
That's not bemazed.
It wasn't avoda.
No,
and it was bemazed.
They were running up the keves. They were running up the ramp. This is a case where he moved on somebody bemazed to kill him. Dafka said, "I'm going to kill that guy. 1st degree murder."
And he wasn't doing it.
Not during the avoda. But if we catch him before the avoda, we take him to basin. Yank him out of the Beis Hamikdash. Let's go. Come with me. But if he's in the middle of the avoda, because it says me'im mizbechi, not me'al mizbechi, we leave him alone. However, we're not done yet. We say in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, lo shanu ela lahemis. That's only if we're gonna kill the Kohen himself who's accused of murder. Top of Amud Beis, avala hachayos. But if it's to save somebody else's life, meaning, says Rashi top line, what if this Kohen has testimony about somebody else who's accused of murder? The Beis about to kill him, but this Kohen's testimony can save his life. Right? So this person's he's been found guilty. The Kohen has Edu said he's not guilty. We pull the Kohen off from the middle of the avoda. Afilu me'al mizbechi, says the Gemara. And there, it's a suffix. We don't know whether what the Kohen has to say is true or not. Maybe he has a davar mamish. Maybe he has something real to contribute to that court case, and maybe he doesn't. Ve'avoda doche Shabbos. But we know that the avoda in the Beis Hamikdash, all kinds of avodas doche Shabbos, slaughtering, like everything, right? How much more so does saving a life push off the prohibitions of Shabbos? Now the third answer, Na'ana Rabbi Elazar. This is Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah. The Amar umami l'shiyachad b'masayim v'arba'im u'shmona evarim sheba adam doches haShabbos, bris milah, that impacts 1 out of the 248 limbs of a person's body. We know that by Yom HaShemini you're allowed to do a bris milah. Kal v'chomer l'chol gufa shedoches haShabbos. How much more so for one's entire body that is involved in keeping Shabbos are we allowed to save somebody's life? Now, notice there's a slight tweak in the language here. This is answer number 4. Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yehuda Omer. It doesn't say Na'ana, because the people that we're going to quote now, they weren't walking along the way when the Talmidim asked this Shaila. So they were not answering this question directly, but we record their opinions anyway. Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Es Shab Sosai Tishmoru. Pasuk says, Es Shab Sosai Tishmoru. You have to keep Shabbos. Yachol l'chol, yachol lakol. So I might think that means you have to keep it all the time. Talmud lomar, the pasuk actually says, ach es Shabbos osai tishmoru. And ach, chilek. And ach means that there is an exception. What's the exception? The exception is you're allowed to be mevatel. You're allowed to be doche Shabbos. You're allowed to be mevatel Shabbos to save a life. Rabbi Yonasan ben Yosef Omer, this is number 5, ki kodeshi lachem. The operative word there is lachem. Shabbos is kodesh to you. He misura biyedchem. That Shabbos was given to you. You have some control over Shabbos. V'lo atem misurim biyada. And you are not completely beholden to the Shabbos to keep Shabbos at all costs. The limud here is you're allowed to save a life. You're allowed to save a life. That's the limud there from lachem. In a similar learning, Rabbi Shimon ben Menashe Omer v'shamru v'nei Yisrael es haShabbos. That Bnei Yisrael keeps the Shabbos. First line of Kiddush. Let's see if there's a Rashi here. Rashi, first narrow line. Kidei lasos Shabbosos acheros yizharu b'Shabbos zu b'kim shmir Shabbosos harbe. That in order, and we're going to learn this in a second in the Gemara, that if you want to be able to keep more Shabbosos, we better keep you alive for this one. Says the Gemara. Second to last narrow line. Amar Torah chilal olav Shabbos achas. Better that you should be mechalal today, kadesh yishmor Shabbosos harbe, and so that you should be able to keep more Shabbosos in the future. Two more, and then finally, Amar Rabbi Yehuda, Amar Shmuel. We learn in the name of Shmuel. If I had been there that day, walking with Rabbi Yishmael and Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah and Rabbi Akiva, Hava Amina Didi Adifa Mididu, I would tell you that my answer is better than any of theirs. Now, Shmuel was an Amora. These three that he's talking about in this story were Tanaim, but here's the answer, and everybody knows this. V'chai bahem, because the mitzvos, you're supposed to live with these mitzvos. V'lo sheyamus bahem. And Amar Rava, lekulhu islahu pircha bar midishmuel. The reason that Shmuel is so confident in his view that v'chai bahem teaches us that one is allowed to be doche Shabbos in order to save a life is because there is a common difficulty which with each of the following scenarios, and not to, it's a bit of a spoiler alert, the difficulty is, and the Gemara is about to explain, and it's going to go through a couple of them before leaving us with, here's the principle. All of them deal with vadai, but they don't go far enough to teach us that in cases of safek, you are doche Shabbos for pikuach nefesh. So Amar Rabba, lekulu islu pircha bar midishmuel, delesli pircha. All of these answers, all of these limudim, they have a difficulty with them, except for the opinion of Shmuel. The Rabbi Shmuel, Dilma Kidarab. The problem with Rabbi Shmuel, who was the first in line, the difficulty with him, as Rava taught. The Amar Rava, my time at the Machteres, Chazaka. What's the issue in the case of Machteres? Again, the case of Machteres is where you catch somebody breaking into your house. Psak is, kill him. Why? Ein adam ma'amiratzmo al mamono. Because we know that a person does not stand by when his property is at risk. Rashi, 1, 2, 3, fourth narrow line down. Ein adam ma'amiratzmo milahatzeles mamono miyad ganav. That a person does not stand by and watch his stuff get stolen. V'hai ganav da'asi b'machteres. Now, the person who is breaking in to rob you,
he's going to that extent.
Right, that's right. I've lost the place. Here we go. Doesn't matter. He knows that the owner's going to be there with a gun. The Memar Amar, he knows going in. If he comes after me with a knife, well, I'm going to kill him because I'm here to protect myself too. The ein zeh safek nefashos ela vadai nefashos. Rava's teaching here that that's not a case of safek, where you have a safek and you have a whole psak, a well, and like doche Shabbos for a safek. There's no safek here. It's a vadai. The vadai is if you stand up for yourself, he's going to kill you. Back in the Gemara, ein adam ma'amiratzmo al mamono. V'hai made the yada dekoy la'ape. V'amar ikoy la'ape katil nale. And this robber says, look, this guy stands up for himself. I'm going to kill him. That's a vadai. The Torah amra v'lahargcha hashkem lahargo. If he's coming to kill you, you get up first and hit him before he hits you. V'ashkechan vadai. So we see here, we have a case of it's a vadai that he's coming to kill you. Where's the safek? So that's the difficulty. We're going to see a similar limud now. Safek minalan. But from where do we know a safek for? Second case, Rabbi Akiva Nami, Dilma Kida Abaye. Maybe Rabbi Akiva's case. Now remember, Rabbi Akiva's case was the case of the Kohen. We take this Kohen away and we kill him. What's the issue with that case? Dilma Kida Abaye. Maybe it's like Abaye taught. Amar Abaye, Masrina lezuga the Rabbanon leda im yesh. The word missing there is yesh mamish b'dvarav. We bring two chachamim to the Kohen to verify if what he's saying, his testimony, is true. The Ashkechan Vadai. So once they validate his testimony, that's a Vadai, not a Safek anymore. Safek Minalan. So where do we know from this case of Rabbi Akiva that in a case of Safek, you're Docha Shabbos to save a life? The Kulu Ashkechan Vadai, Safek Minalan. And in all of those cases, you can apply the same principle. You're teaching me a Vadai. For sure, a Vadai is Docha Shabbos. That's obvious. But what about a Safek? Ude Shmuel, skip the word Vadai. Ude Shmuel, Leislei Pircha. But for Shmuel, there's no question against Shmuel. Amar Ravina v'Itemer of Nachman bar Yitzchak. Ravina says, and it's possible that it was taught by Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak, Tavachada pilpelta, that one sharp pepper is pilpelta charifa. One sharp pepper is better. Mimelotzina dekare is better than a basket of it's squash. I don't know if anybody has an article. Squash gourds, something like that. Meaning, Shmuel's v'chai bahem is so sharp that it far outweighs all of those other opinions, because that gives us the rishus, that gives us the mitzvah of being doche Shabbos for Hatzalas Nefashos. Okay, we are at the Mishnah in the middle, smack in the middle of Pehei Amud Beis. Shachar is 7:45.
Yes.
Okay, I think we'll be fine. This is a very famous Mishnah. A lot of the principles in this Mishnah we've known since grade school. Chatas, well, we didn't know the Chatas for Ashram part, but the rest of it we did. Chatas, and as we know, just to refresh our memories, a Chatas is brought when somebody sins b'shogeg and an Aveira that had they done a b'mezid, they would be chayav kares. The Asham vadai, an Asham is brought in cases of Gzela and Me'ila, when one improperly uses something that belongs to the Mishkan or the Beis HaMikdash. So in cases where one brought a Chatas and an Asham vadai, as opposed to an Asham talui, which is brought where you're not sure if you're Rashi explains this, you're not sure if you're chayav b'chatas, so you bring an asham talui, that prevents you from yisurin, and then once you figure out if you actually did something b'shogeg, then you bring a chatas. That is absolutely correct. So chatas for asham vadai mechaprin. So when you bring those karbanos, that's it for your kapara. You are totally atoned for those averos. Misa v'yom kippurin mechaprim ima tshuva. Death and Yom Kippur atone as long as they were accompanied by tshuva. Tshuva mechaperes alaveros kalas al aseh ve'al losa aseh. Tshuva atones for lighter, perhaps lower level mitzvos, whether they were mitzvos aseh, mitzvos losa aseh, v'al chamuros, but on the more serious mitzvos, utole ad sheyevo Yom Kippurim. The Rush adds the tshuva is toleh until Yom Kippur comes, via chaper, and atones for him. Ha'omer echeteve ashuv, a person who says, I'm going to sin, but then I'll repent. I'm going to sin, but then I'll repent. If you're on that hamster wheel, ein maspikin biyado la'asos tshuva. It's almost as if he has no time, no ability to do tshuva, because he's in this constant cycle of sin, tshuva. If he says, echeteve Yom Kippurim mechaper, ein Yom Kippurim mechaper. If he says, I got this, I'm going to sin now, but I have the 10th of Tishrei rolling around every year, I'm covered. But Mishnah says not so much.
What's the difference between the first part and the second part? One, you just do routinely.
Because one says, listen,
Yom Kippur. You
right.
continuously say, I'm going to do tshuva.
One says,
on the same Avera.
It's July 5th. I'm going to sin. I'm not going to make a bracha on this coffee. No makir tov to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. I'll do tshuva later because I'll feel bad. When I get my afternoon coffee to prepare tomorrow's daf, I'm not going to make a bracha because I'll get to do tshuva later. That's different from a person who says, I'm going to be a horrible person all year long, and at Kol Nidre, I'll come to my senses and I'll do tshuva. For sure it's worse, because the Mishnah says, Ein Yom Kippur mechaber, doesn't even help you.
So, but for the first one, it does mechaper.
It doesn't say that it doesn't.
Doesn't say it does.
Doesn't say it doesn't.
Well, what does?
But tshuva doesn't help you
No, but Yom Kippur mechaper for the first part.
for the
of
first
sin.
part.
Right.
But the regular everyday tshuva, whatever that is,
Will not
does
mechaper.
not help you.
Right. Okay.
Averos shibin adam lamakom, sins between man and his creator, Yom Kippur mechaper. Averos shibin adam lechavero, ein Yom Kippur mechaper. So this is, the right side of the luchos, left side of the luchos thing. If we all learned this a gazillion years ago, right? That you're not that the mitzvahs bein adam lechavero, Yom Kippurim doesn't help ad sheyiratze es chavero, until you make up with the friend that you have wronged. Dorish Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah in a similar teaching. Mikol chatosechem lifnei Hashem titaru, from all your sins that were done before Hashem. That is a reference to the Aver sheben adam lamakom Yom Kippur mechaper. That the mitzvahs ben adam lamakom, that mitzvahs between man and God, Yom Kippurim takes care of them. However, Averos sheben adam lachavero, ein Yom Kippurim mechaper ad sheyiratze es chavero. Okay, Amar Rabbi Akiva, Ashreichem Yisrael. How praiseworthy are you, Klal Yisrael? Lifnei mi atem mitarim. Before whom are you atoned? Mi mitareschem avichem shemashamayim. Who purifies you? Who atones for you? HaKadosh Baruch Hu, our Father in heaven. Shne'emar v'zarakti aleichem mayim toharim mutartem. Ve'omer mikveh Yisrael Hashem. That who is the mikveh of Yisrael? It's HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Ma mikveh mitares hatameim. Just like a ritual bath, a mikvah, has the power to purify somebody who is ritually impure. HaKadosh Baruch Hu mitahares Yisrael. So too, we turn to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, who purifies Klal Yisrael. Says the Gemara, 10, 12 lines up. Asham vadoi in Asham talui lo. The implication of the Mishnah, which said Chatas v'asham vadai mechaprin, is that an asham talui, meaning again, that's an asham, a korban asham, a guilt offering that we bring if we're not sure if we're chayav v'chatas, but that holds off the yisur and that keeps the punishment at bay. That implies that the asham talui has no kapara to it. However, v'hakapara ksiva bay, and Rashi points out that the pasuk is talking about an asham talui and it has the word kapara or the concept of kapara. So how can you have that implication that an asham talui has no aspect of atonement? Gemara answers, Hanach, these, meaning the chatas and the asham vadai, mechapri kapara gemura, they atone a complete atonement. Asham talui, eno mechaper kapara gemura. But the asham talui is not mechaper a kapara gemura. Look at the Rashi. This is probably 10 lines up from the bottom, 3 lines below the big Gimel Mem. Asham tola yene mechaper kapara gemura ela tola lahagin ela mina yisurin achi yedelo shabadei chata v'yavichatas. It only protects him from punishment until such time as we said earlier that he figures out that he actually did something wrong b'shogeg, again in a mitzvah, that had he done it b'mezid b'chayav kares, and then he'll bring a chatas, and the chatas, as we just learned, is a kapara gemura, and that covers him beyond the power of the asham talui. Inami, another option, hanach ein acher mechaper kaparasan, that for these, meaning an asham and a chatas and an asham vadai, there's nothing else that can take care of their kapara, because that's it. If you did an avera b'shogeg, you got to bring a korban chatas, and that's your kapara. However, asham talui, acher mechaper kaparasa. You still have the chatas that you have to bring. So even though you brought the asham talui, gives you some kapara, but not the whole thing. So that's the difference between the two types of asham. The asham vadai takes care of you completely. The other asham, the asham talui, still needs one more korban to really take care of your kapara in full. Titnan, chayav chatos ve'ashamos vadain sha'avra lein yom kippurim chayavin. Now let's say you're chayav chatas or an asham vadai, and Yom Kippur comes and goes, and you haven't yet had a chance to bring those korbanos. Guess what? You're still chayav those korbanos. Ashamos teluyin, but if you brought an asham talui because you weren't sure if you were chayav, Yom Kippur takes care of you. You are putter, says Rashi 6 lines up. Yom Kippurim nechaper alein. the time of Mefarish Krisus. If you happen to know Krisus by heart, you'll know what that reference is. I do not. But Yom Kippur takes care of your full kapara if you brought an asham talui without necessarily even ever figuring out that you were chayav b'chatas. And if you did figure it out, by the way, after Yom Kippur, you're not chayav that korban. That's what this is teaching. Okay, a little bit more. We're going to stop at the next two dots. We're going to stop 4 lines from the bottom. Misa v'Yom Kippurim mechaprin im hatshuva. So the Mishnah said that death and Yom Kippur are mechaper, but only if you've done tshuva first. Im hatshuva in bifnei atzman lo. So the obvious derivation from that line in the Mishnah is that if you've done tshuva, death and Yom Kippur help, that they're your complete kapara. But by themselves, without tshuva, they do not. Nema deloka Rebbe. So maybe this is not like the opinion of Rebbe in a line that's repeated in 3 or 4 other places in Shas, including one coming up in a couple of days. Rebbe Omer al kol aveiro shebetorah in bein aseh tshuva, bein lo aseh tshuva. According to Rebbe, every avera in the Torah, whether you did tshuva or not, Yom HaKippurim mechaper. Yom HaKippurim takes care of you. Now that's not like the brisa that we just learned. Chutz, except for the following 3 cases. 1, miporek ol. Somebody, Rashi explains, is a kofer be'ikr. Umegala panim b'Torah. Somebody who wrongly interprets the teachings of the Torah, the teaching of Moshe Rabbeinu. Umefebris basar. And somebody who does not keep the mitzvah of bris milah. She'im asa tshuva, that in those 3 cases, if you did tshuva, Yom HaKippur mechaper. Yom Kippur provides atonement. V'im lo asa tshuva, ein Yom Kippur mechaper. So we see that it's possible that, other than those exceptions, our Mishnah is not like the opinion of Rebbe. Answers the Gemara, 4 lines from the bottom, first word, afilu tema Rebbe. You could even say that this is in accordance with the Shita of Rebbe, because what's Rebbe's limud? Tshuva b'aya Yom Kippurim. That if you did tshuva before Yom Kippur or before Misa, then you still need Yom Kippurim to complete the process. But says Rebbe that if you didn't get around to tshuva, either Yom Kippur rolled around before you had the chance, or Rahman al-Litzlan, somebody passed away, perhaps very suddenly with no ability, to do tshuva, Yom Kippurim lo baya tshuva. Yom Kippur's power is so strong that even without tshuva, according to Rebbe, Yom Kippurim is still mechaper. So we will stop here. That is the conclusion of Daf Pei Hey. Tomorrow Daf Pei Vav. Have a wonderful